Hello and welcome to the Wedding Pro podcast, the podcast where we share tips and tricks for wedding vendors and couples, share insight into the wedding world, and share about our experiences. We are Gracie and Angela Felix of Felix Wedding Films. We are so glad you tuned into this week's episode. Now let's get into it. Alrighty, I am so excited for this week's episode of the podcast. We are continuing our series. It's called What Wedding Vendors Wish You Knew. We're just inviting a bunch of different wedding professionals in different vendor categories on to kind of peel back the curtain, share a little bit of the BTS, share what they wish couples and vendors knew. And this week, we're so excited to have Erika Allen of Blackberry Ridge on to share all about what wedding venues wish you knew. But before we get started, Erika, could you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about what you do. Tell us about Blackberry Ridge. What is that? And anything else that you want to share with us.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to share. It's an honor to be part of the pod today. I've been following along on all of your other episodes, so it's a little nerve-wracking and so exciting to be part of the pod family now. So I've been working for Blackberry Ridge for about 2 years. My title is Venue Director. What that means is I'm a liaison between our owners and our property teams and our clients and our vendors. So that means pretty much all communication falls to me. I'm helping support the owners in all of their building initiatives on property. I'm helping support and oversee anything related to our event calendar. So I wear a lot of hats at Blackberry Ridge, but I've been there about 2 years, just a little bit over 2 years. Prior to that, I was working with a local wedding planning company after my husband and I relocated to the area almost 7 years ago now. So my professional experience in the industry is around 6 years or so here locally. And we love Chattanooga. We moved here from Alabama. That's where we were born and raised. I live with my husband and my 2 Siberian cats, who I love. They're my fur babies. We just moved into a new house, and so I'm getting really into interior decorating now, which is super fun and creative. I'm really glad that I've had the experience in hospitality and event planning prior to working at the venue. I feel like it's super invaluable to being able to educate and help and guide clients from a really well-rounded perspective, knowing all the logistics and all the other vendor types that are impacted by, a client booking our property. So I'm excited to dive a little bit more into that today.
Yeah, I definitely know that it helps you as the venue director having the previous experience as a planner, because obviously you see different perspective than, someone who doesn't have that experience. So I'm super excited to have you on because I know that you'll share all your perspectives. But just so that the listeners have an idea of where you work, can you share a little bit about Blackberry Ridge? How many venues do you have? Where are they located? Anything that you feel like the listeners would want to know.
Yes, Blackberry Ridge is a multi-venue property in North Georgia, specifically in Trenton, Georgia. So right in the corner of northwestern Georgia, where it meets Tennessee and Alabama. So we pull a lot from the Chattanooga, Atlanta, Birmingham areas. We have 3 venues now. The first one is called the Villa. The second one, which is our luxury venue, and the one we're most well known for, the Conservatory. And we currently have under construction a new micro-ceremony site called Blackberry Village. So we are expanding and growing all the time. We have multiple on-site lodging options as well. Our property is quite extensive. We have over 250 acres of land because it used to be an old golf course. So our couples get to enjoy the serenity and the peacefulness of the North Georgia mountains when they come to stay with us. And because our owner is European, each space has a little bit of that European design and inspiration, although they definitely pull from more of the Southern style for some of the buildings. The conservatory especially is very European. Lots of Italian and French-inspired architecture and design elements that is really unlike anything that's in the Southeast especially. So we have couples come from all over the country that are really wanting that European excursion for their guests, but they can find it right here in Georgia.
And that's why we love working at Blackberry Ridge. We've worked at the Villa and the Conservatory, and hopefully we'll work at your new venue sometime. I would love to go ahead and dive into some of our questions. First, I'd love to answer some questions that are more geared towards couples, and then we can focus on vendors specifically. I think this is going to be a very interesting episode because there's just so many things that couples and vendors don't really know when it comes to venues. So I think this will probably be a popular one with our listeners. Could you go ahead and walk us through what a typical journey would look like from inquiry to booking to wedding day for your couples? And I know that not every venue will be the same, but this will give us, give our listeners at least an idea of what it could look like.
Yes. So for our property, we would really encourage couples to look at our website and our Instagram pages before they book, because that's not only going to tell them if our design and our features are a good fit for their wedding, but we also have starting pricing and a lot of, frequently asked questions answered through the website. But the inquiry form on our website is linked to our brochure. So any couples that want more information like pricing, FAQs, and even, what comes included with the venue, you'll get in a pretty comprehensive brochure. So go fill out the inquiry form if you're interested in our property, and you can have a lot of information. But from there, our venue assistant will follow up and we can schedule a tour, schedule a call to make sure that all of your questions get answered. We have a booking questionnaire that'll gather a little bit more specific details on your specific booking so that we can send you a booking proposal. And that's where you can read your contract and, have your payment schedule, all of your payments outlined in that proposal. At that point, we have a deposit, you sign your contract, and then you're booked with us. So from there on, you do have access to, our team for any questions you might have. You can schedule site visits for planning purposes or design at any time. And, we'll help guide you through the rest of the planning process from there.
Awesome. And this is a big question that I'm sure a lot of couples are wondering. What percentage of the couple's overall budget would you recommend, or what is typical that they should spend specifically on the venue? And then another question to that question is, what does that venue fee typically include?
This is a great question, and I love that we're opening the conversation about it. It's worth caveating that budget can be an entire episode all on its own. There are so many layers and so many things to consider when building a budget, but typically, if a venue includes access to the venue space, the tables, the chairs, maybe even some decor pieces, or extra pieces that you can use for your venue, I would not recommend going over a quarter of your budget. So 25% or below. And obviously, if the venue offers more, maybe that can be a higher percentage of your budget. I am assuming we're not talking about all-inclusive venues, because the conversation is very different when you have an all-inclusive venue, because then you're more or less combining a lot of different categories of your budget into that one number. So in that case, a much higher percentage of the budget shouldn't be that scary when you're thinking about food and beverage and flowers and linens and maybe even a planner. But for venues that are truly just the venue, I would stick under a quarter of your budget. And if it's a venue that you feel is going to need a lot of enhancements in order to make it what you're going to love, probably sticking to the lower end of that percentage, maybe that 10 to 15%. It's all really relative and all really based on what the client is going to want out of their design and out of their venue. Another caveat to this is the planner is going to be crucial. If you don't already have a planner before you've sourced your venue, I would highly recommend getting a planner that can help you understand the impact that your venue selection is going to make on your overall budget, and then how much flexibility you're going to have in your budget to book your other vendors. Because unfortunately, if you kind of go bankrupt on your venue and you can't achieve that design that you always thought you could with the budget that you have left, and a planner can come in and help you certainly figure those pieces out. But having a planner up front is going to help educate you on how to build the budget in the first place based on your guest count needs, what you want for your design, as well as backup plans. How is this venue going to work if the weather is poor? So definitely have a planner when you're building your budget, or at least have a resource that is reliable to customize your budget to your wedding.
Mm-hmm. This is so good. And thank you for your transparency. I know that this is, this is a topic that a lot of couples are like, well, how much should I spend on my venue? And should I hire a planner first? Or do I need a planner? What I love about your venue is that you require couples to have a planner. You don't do the whole venue coordinator thing. Of course, you guys have venue staff, you do your roles, but I love that you really encourage those couples to get a good planner. They're going to guide them. They're going to help them see all those fees. They're going to be able to make sense of everything. So I'd love to kind of not caveat, but go down a little rabbit hole real quick. I'd love to know, why do you require couples to have a planner to have a wedding at your venues?
We require a planner because it makes everyone else's job easier and it serves the client the best. Having a background in planning might make me a little biased, but even from other vendor perspectives, from photo video perspective, having an organized timeline, catering, knowing when food needs to come out. So the planner really is caught in the middle of every logistic that could possibly happen on the event day. They're responsible for making sure the client's vision and really their comfort and ease can be accomplished on wedding day, but also making sure vendors arrive on time. Little fires get put out, either literally or figuratively, that if the weather backup plan needs to be implemented, that they are going to mobilize the vendor teams to do that. They're making sure that everything is cohesive on the wedding day. And without that piece, is it possible to have the wedding without a planner? Yes. But does that mean the responsibility then has to fall on family or friends or the client to stress and worry about those things rather than being present? Also, yes. So because luxury and because a great client experience is our priority at our property, we believe that having planners with a proven track record of excellence and professionalism, great client experience is really crucial, not only to our operations, because it makes our setup of the tables and chairs easier when we know exactly where they're going, exactly what the planner needs, that the table sizing is right, because their linens need to fit on the tables. Those things that affect our team are really, really important. And having a planner in place is going to make our job easier. But we also just believe it's going to make the vendor and the client experience a little bit more seamless.
Absolutely. Yes. From our perspective, working at different levels of weddings over all of the many years that we've been working in this industry, the weddings that have planners, not specifically venue coordinators, but planners who are apart from the venue, it just makes the day so much more seamless. And weddings that don't necessarily have a planner, like you said, all those responsibilities are going to have to be handed to someone else. And so it's either the couple or the family or the vendor team. And for the photo video team, we're not planners. So we don't know how to make a timeline for the caterers, for example. That's just not in our scope of work. And so without, this could be a whole episode on its own about why you need a planner, but
it really could be.
I'll bring it back that we really appreciate that you guys not only care about the couple, but you care about the vendors and just the whole experience. And so we appreciate that you require a planner.
Well, thank you.
But kind of to bring it back to venues, what are some key questions that you feel like couples should ask, or at least information they should be aware of before booking, to clearly understand what all is or isn't included in that venue booking fee?
Yeah, that's a great question. Reading the documents that you're sent is always going to be the first step, whether it's a brochure or a draft of the contract or any other online resources that are provided to you by the vendor. This really goes for any vendor type. If you're entering a contractual agreement, you should probably read the contract and know what you're signing. But we try to be really transparent about our pricing, our services, and what comes included with the venue up front. Maybe even before you schedule a call or a tour, you're going to see a lot of that information in the communication that we provide ahead of time, but we make it a point on the tour to try and make sure couples are super comfortable with their investment. So there are so many questions that I feel like are really important for a client to ask, but I would encourage couples to ask what's important to you. You know, every client has a different priority for their day. So if your priority is having a great backup plan in case of weather because you're getting married in the spring, or if your priority is the getting ready spaces because you have a large bridal party, you know, whatever it is that is a priority for you to have answered before making this investment, ask that question. We want every couple that books with us to be 100% confident this is the venue for them. And if you have any hesitations or any reason to maybe feel like this isn't the best fit, then ask that question. That's going to help give you that peace of mind.
Yeah. That's really good advice. And I'd love to kind of go off what you said about like backup plan if the weather's not great. Why would you say that it's so important for couples to not just consider plan A for ideally if the weather's great, but also plan B if the weather just is not cooperating?
Yes, so this is one of the topics that I think is most underdeveloped by clients during the planning process. And understandably so if you're getting married in an area of the country like the Southeast where the weather might be a little bit more unpredictable, or, you know, we have really clear seasons where the weather is going to impact weddings differently and you don't like to think about that negative weather that could happen during your time of year. But really working with the vendors, planner especially, to try and educate couples on what your options are is really important because none of us want to stress about that at the last minute. So thinking through, even when you're sourcing your venue for the first time, before you've even booked a venue, think about what the rain plan or cold weather plan or extreme heat plan would be at that venue. And if you're not comfortable with that backup plan for whatever reason, whether it's not as aesthetic as you would want, or the investment would be too high for your budget, having to get a tent or whatever. Those things are important to think about because if you can't be comfortable with that backup weather plan, in the case that weather does happen, that's not ideal, then it might not be a good plan A venue for you as well. The backup plan can have significant impacts on your budget and your design, as well as the flow, like how your guests are going to experience the space. So I think it's really important for client peace of mind and also the ease of the vendors as well to be thinking about what that backup plan looks like and if you're okay with that. Clients, don't just shove it to the side. Don't not think about the weather plan because you don't like it, but have a plan in place. That way you feel confident regardless of weather. You're going to have a beautiful and peaceful and enjoyable day. And I promise your guests are going to completely understand. You know, they would love an outdoor ceremony, but if they have to move inside, they're there for you. They're there to celebrate your wedding and your marriage. And that's what the focal point is. So anything that you feel is not going to take away your peace and your joy in that moment, I think is a great investment. And go ahead and ask on your venue tours, during the inquiry process, what's your backup plan? Where do I have my ceremony if I can't have it outside like I want to have it? And talk through those things before you even choose your venue. That way you're not blindsided at the end of the planning process when your planner says, what's the plan? You know, if we can't get married outside, what are you okay with? Go ahead and be thinking about that well in advance.
Yeah, this is so important because, I mean, like, of course, the aesthetic is a big reason why couples pick a venue in the first place. And if the venue does not have a solid plan B for if it rains, or if you 100% would have to bring in a tent, of course, that would, increase the budget. So it's really important for couples to know what all their options are. I mean, we've filmed so many weddings. We've filmed weddings where it was like a monsoon. We've filmed multiple weddings at the conservatory where it did rain. And one of them, we did have to do it in the glass hall, which it was very beautiful.
Stunning,
and then the other
totally.
one, we still did it outside, but they had a tent over the ceremony space. So, it's good for couples to know what their options are, and couples make sure that you like plan B.
Yeah. And you don't need to get too into the weeds because there are always things that are inevitably going to come up, like your photographer and videographer's equipment can't be sitting out in the rain Instruments, if you have live musicians for your ceremony, they can't sit out in the rain. They can't sit out in snowy weather or 100-degree weather. Things like that you're not going to want to think about as the client. And I would encourage you not to get too tied up in those weeds. But the major things, like how do my guests arrive? Where are they seated? How do I enter, the room for the ceremony? How can I repurpose my florals? Things like that. If you're going to be uncomfortable with any of those options in a Plan B scenario, maybe look around at a few other venues to see what their options are. And consult your planner to see what your options are. If you have to flip a room, what staffing does that require? If, you are getting married in a region or in a venue that might be subject to more extreme weather.
Yeah. And that's another reason why it's really good for couples to have a planner, because it's a lot to think about, but we won't go down that rabbit hole again. What do you feel like are some of the other things that couples might overlook when they're touring or booking a venue, besides obviously overlooking, Plan B, rain plan?
That's a great question. I think maybe even their requirements for certain vendors. If you're sourcing a venue that already has a lot of the vendors or services included, but you wanted to bring your own, might not be a great fit for that venue if you had someone in mind. As you know, we have that policy, so planners, caterers, bartenders, all required by our team to come from a list that we provide. And in fact, 2026 and beyond, we're incorporating in-house food and beverage. So that's now required to be booked on top of the venue packages at our property. So each venue is going to have different requirements for their vendors, or maybe even different recommendations for their vendors. So ask your venue manager or tour guide or whoever you're connecting with about what their vendor policies are, if you can bring your own, or if you have to use the ones that they provide. Or if you're just looking for a great connection, ask them, who do you recommend? And you might find a vendor that you love, whether you go with that venue or not. I'd love to spread the love and promote, our other vendor teams that do a fabulous job. Even if our venue doesn't end up being the best fit for the client, I would love to point you in the right direction of some professional vendors that are going to do a great job regardless of where you get married.
And I love that you guys keep your lists up to date of who you recommend, because I know some other venues don't update their lists that often, and couples might reach out to someone and they're not in business anymore. So I love that you guys are on it, and you're just like every part of the journey for the couple, you're trying to help. But that kind of leads into my next question. Are there any red flags that you feel like couples should watch out for when visiting or communicating with potential venues that maybe they're interested in booking?
Another great one. These are all such good questions. Probably just in general, the red flags would be things like unprofessionalism, not clear communication or not quick communication. If you're noticing their attitude or even their attire is unprofessional, I think really dismissal also of your vision or of your budget, or if you're getting the sense that you're not aligned with that vendor in any way, could be a red flag. Not having transparency when you ask questions. Not to say that there might be some questions that are harder to answer than others. Or maybe your budget really isn't a good fit for this venue because you're trying to spend 50% of your budget on a venue instead of 20%. There's something to be said about education, and opening the conversation doesn't mean that every answer has to be an answer that you're going to like or want to hear. But if that vendor can't give you clear answers to your questions, or if they are gatekeeping answers to your questions for reasons beyond just, hey, I want to schedule a discovery call and then I'll go through all that with you. And I really just think those are good qualities to have in general. Any vendor that I would recommend is going to be professional. They're going to have really clear communication. They're going to be collaborative. They're going to want to work with me. They're going to be excited to work within our guidelines and within our policies. They're going to be really innovative and creative. They are going to treat clients with respect and also be really experienced and wise on how to guide you through the planning process. Any vendor that doesn't meet those, what I consider just the basic criteria, might be a red flag.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Do you feel like you have any hot takes when it comes to like couples and venues? This is a little bit of a spicy question.
It is a little bit of a spicy question. I'll go back to read your contract. That's not really a hot take. I guess it can be, but please, please, please read your contract. Know what you're signing. Know what financial implications there are to not following through your end of the deal. Same thing for us. We want to make sure we're following through on our end of the deal, and you can hold us accountable to that. But please know what you're getting yourself into. And if we've sent you documents to read or a link to resources or, a vendor list, and we say, hey, you have to choose from this vendor list, we would love for you to align with our policies. You've agreed to that when you signed a contract with us. So please know what you've signed, know what you're accountable for. And I guess the hot take in that is don't make it my problem when you can't. Is that too spicy?
No, that's good.
Yeah,
I like
so
that.
know what you're responsible for, and then if you can't follow in your end of the bargain, don't get mad at me for keeping you accountable. Thankfully, we have such good couples, such great vendors. This is a really rare problem, but the day-to-day implication of that hot take is I don't want to answer the same basic question 10 times in a day when I know the document clearly states the answer to your question that I sent you a couple of months ago. So I would encourage couples to keep a really organized system of accessing any type of document that your vendors send you, because the answer to your question might be in that document instead of coming to me and asking, even though that might be easier, because I understand everybody's overwhelmed and stressed and you're working a full-time job, and then planning can feel like a full-time job on top of that. It's easier to text me. I totally get that. But I also have 150 clients that think the same exact way. And so it can get overwhelming for the venue to have to answer basic questions that have been communicated in other ways.
Yeah, this is a good one. Shouldn't be a hot take, but in our day and age, people don't read as much. So I would recommend for every single vendor category, you should read the contract, know what you're getting, and don't ask questions that are already answered in the contract.
There you
go. So I'd love to kind of move more towards questions that are geared towards vendors now. But do you feel like there's anything else off the top of your mind that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet that is kind of more geared towards couples?
Maybe just this is such an exciting time. We're excited to celebrate with you. Pick the vendors that are going to align with your vision for your day and are able to celebrate your priorities, So we would love if Blackberry Ridge was the home of your wedding, but even if it's not, we can be happy and supportive and cheer you on in your upcoming marriage. It's such an exciting time, to be engaged and to be dreaming about the future. And I think you should choose vendors that are going to be in your corner and fight for you and cheer you on. Hopefully the planning experience is a really peaceful and enjoyable one. Like, you'll get decision fatigue regardless of who you are and how long you're planning. But I hope you can be excited about the engagement season and about picking your vendors and about dreaming about the future. But at the end of the day, it's you and your significant other and your marriage that's the most important. So just getting to take advantage of the season to celebrate that and to prepare yourself for the next season, which is just so beautiful.
Yeah. That's why we love weddings. It's such a special time.
This is why we do what we do, because we never get tired of talking about love and weddings and all the things that come with it. So we're happy to walk alongside you and design that wedding with you and dream with you and get excited with you.
Awesome. So I'd love to kind of now shift the conversation to speak more towards vendors, which couples, if you're listening, this might still be insightful for you because it'll peel back the curtain, give you a little BTS on what happens on the vendor side of things. But I'd love to know your perspective, Erika. So every vendor category has different needs when it comes to things like power, setup, load in, load out, etc. Why do you think it's so important that vendors take the initiative to ask the venue in advance or schedule a site tour if they've never worked there to just prepare ahead of time for the wedding?
Yeah, it's going to reduce the chance that anything's going to go wrong on wedding day. That doesn't 100% prevent any issues from happening, but let's say a DJ doesn't know where the power outlet is or what the power situation is at the ceremony site until he arrives to set up. Then it becomes a problem for the timeline or from the planner or for the DJ's stress levels if he doesn't know where he needs power, if he needed power. So doing a site visit in advance so that way you know where to drop off your equipment, where to store it so that it's not in the way, where are the outlets that you're going to need, is a way to not only prepare yourself, but make the other vendors more confident too that you are just going to show up, do your job, do what you got to do, get it done, not cause issues, only because there's a potential for issues when you arrive and you don't know where you're going, what you're doing. I can say from personal experience at our property, because we have multiple venues, every now and then, if you didn't read that email or you didn't know what venue you were going to and you go to the wrong venue and then go, this doesn't look like the floor plan. Let me figure out where I'm going. Then I get a call, right? And it's wedding day and I think this is an emergency. So I'm getting a call from vendors and it's just because you didn't take the time to do your research. So I think it's one of the most professional things you can do is reach out to the venue to introduce yourself, schedule a tour, say, hey, is there anything that I need to know about working at your property? Not only is that going to make that vendor stand out in my mind a little bit more, it's going to give us that personal interaction. So that way I can say, oh, that DJ was really well prepared. They were really nice. They showed initiative. I feel like they're really confident and know what they're doing on site. And if they had a question, they would have asked me. So I know that going into wedding day, everything's going to be taken care of. Sorry for picking on DJs. They just have a lot of logistics to think about.
It's okay. Yeah.
But the same thing for a photographer or videographer. If you've never shot at the venue, I'm confident you've got the skills and the know-how to just show up and do a wonderful job. But it might make you feel more confident also to know how the lighting is, where you can store all of your gear, how far away the ceremony site is from the bridal suite. So things like that can really help that vendor know what they need, because I don't know what you need. You know, you're the expert on your gear and your logistics and your services. So any way that I can support that and help make you feel more confident and make the personal connection, which is going to make you stand out in my mind a little bit more come wedding day, I just think is a great extra step that's easy to make you stand out and make everyone work well together on wedding day.
Yeah, this is definitely important for especially bigger venues or venues that vendors are not familiar with. I know that when we were first contracted for our first wedding at the conservatory, we were like, okay, this venue is very large. It's beautiful. We absolutely have to do a tour first because we want to make sure we know where everything is, where we can store our gear. And after that tour, it just made us relax so much. So come wedding day, we were prepared. We knew where everything was. We didn't have to ask where we put our stuff. It just, yes, we could have showed up and done an amazing job if we had never been there before. But for us personally, it just kind of calmed our anxieties and gave us the confidence that we know what we're doing. We know where we're going.
Exactly. And I hear feedback from clients all the time that they love when their vendors have been to their venue before. In fact, I've worked with clients that would not hire a vendor who had not worked at their venue before because they want to also go into their day knowing that you've got it handled. You're not going to have questions, or let's say for photographers and videographers, that you're going to make them look good in that space. You don't want to have regrets at the end of the day because you didn't know how the lighting was in that space, and so you had to figure out in the moment, which caused more stress. So for the client's sake, knowing exactly what you're getting into means there's less stress on wedding day, more confidence for the clients and the vendors alike. And then unnecessarily questions don't get filtered through the planner or the venue contact. When we've had a year to schedule a site visit with you, you can email me at any time. There is a time and place for that, and the morning of the wedding is not that time or place.
Very, very true. So as you know, obviously vendors reflect the professionalism of the venue. That's for better or for worse. So why do you feel like it's so important for venues to build strategic partnerships and offer intentional vendor recommendations with vendors that are proven to be professional and do great work and just like serve the client really well?
Yeah. In the same way that a client has a vision for their day and they want to select vendors that have that same vision and are able to execute that same level of service that they're looking for, the venue has the same perspective in a different way, in that we are all one big team on wedding day, and the guests and sometimes the clients even can't differentiate what staff is what with brand. So because our brand is all about luxury and excellence, we want to make sure that the clients, or that the vendors we're recommending and partnering with strategically, also have that same goal in mind. Because if someone, let's say a guest, is experiencing our property for the first time, and then they are attending maybe a formal or black tie wedding, but the photographer is in jeans and tennis shoes, they're not going to perceive our venue as very luxury. And so even those little things, the photos can be beautiful, the customer service can be amazing, but the perceived value of the service now has been dampened by your unprofessionalism. And so we want to make sure that all the vendors we either recommend or strictly approve or not approve are ones that, fall into that category of ones that are going to help us achieve a reputation of excellence and of luxury. And there's so many vendors out there, it's so hard to be selective. Not to say that any vendor that we don't recommend can't do a wonderful job, but having a list that's a mile long when you're inquiring with the venue can be really overwhelming too. So we want to kind of keep our list shorter and more selective, because that serves our clients well and it serves our vendors well. But over time, the list can change. It can shorten or it can lengthen, because at any given time, if we feel these vendors are serving our clients great, they align with our vision, we're happy to recommend them. But then as time goes on, maybe they don't. Maybe they're no longer a good fit and we can remove them, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing a poor job or we're unprofessional, but maybe they've had changes in their business that now don't align with our brand. That's a really, really hard position to be in. But at the end of the day, our focus is the client and the guest experience and making sure that we're aligned with the brands that we're recommending and approving to work at our property.
Yeah, I think this is so important. I hope other venues are listening to this, because I do think venues should be more selective with who they're recommending, just because from what I have seen over the years, sometimes the recommended list is just kind of a hodgepodge and it's not actually helpful to the couple. Some of the vendor categories are not even in business anymore. Like, for example, I was reaching out to a venue that we loved working with. I wanted to see if I could get on the preferred vendor list because 3 of their videographers on their website weren't even in business anymore. And so I love that you guys are on top of it. And I think all venues should be on top of it, because it just helps couples so much more. And it helps the vendors that are helping you. It's just all around is a really, really good practice.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for the compliment. I'm glad that that's been a benefit to you and that you're also seeing the benefit of that. We've seen the benefit of that. And I'm always going to see ways that we can do that better and how we can grow next year. I never want to get settled into our list, because there's always going to be another vendor out there probably that's a great fit. And we haven't found that vendor yet. So we're always going to try and grow and change and improve in that area for the best of our couples. And like I said, that's because there are so many vendors out there. I know our couples experience this. It's overwhelming, the number of vendors there are to choose from. And so our list really should never be like, oh, well, I looked at your recommended photographers. Are these all? No, that's not all. I can always recommend more. What are you looking for? Personally, whenever someone asks me for a recommendation, I don't just send them the list. I say, well, I can send you a list, but what are you looking for? Let me help you narrow down this list even more, and I'll tell you my favorites, because we're going to feature photographers with lots of different styles. We're going to feature planners with lots of different package pricing. I want to make sure I'm communicating what's going to be the best fit for the client. Because just because two planners operate differently doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It means that one is a better fit for one couple and the other is a better fit for another couple. Or that one's a better fit for our property and one's a better fit for another property. It's all relative.
Yeah, that's true. You kind of touched on this, but this is a listener question, so I'd love to ask it. So you know that a lot of vendors dream of being added to a venue's preferred vendor list, especially if it's a venue that they really love and admire. So what do you all look for when you're considering a vendor to be added to that list? I know you kind of touched on it, but could you elaborate a little further?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reiterate some of the green flags we talked about earlier in the episode. Professionalism, communication, professional dress. I know y'all have talked about that in a couple of other episodes. I cannot stress dressing professionally enough. Also coming out to do a tour, connecting, offering ways to collaborate, whether or not we have an opportunity for that. I think the willingness to, hey, let me show you what I can do, instead of, can I be on your list, is gonna elicit two very different responses from me on the venue side. So really wanting to showcase, wanting accountability, wanting scrutiny, and like a chance to prove yourself is always going to be perceived as like a great quality on the venue side. Being really collaborative and innovative and creative, because sometimes we can see a lot of very similar designs on the venue side. It can feel monotonous, especially during seasons where you see trends that are over and over and over. And although those trends are beautiful every single time, having vendors that creatively problem solve, put a new twist on those trends, are able to guide the clients or execute logistics in a new way, always are gonna stand out to us. So yeah, all those green flags. At the very minimum, we want businesses to be legitimate. We want vendors to have experience. So if you're working with us, I'm probably looking for a business license. I'm looking for insurance. I'm looking for a portfolio online. And if you don't have those things, it's a little bit easier to filter you out for our property specifically. Not that you can't be a great fit for another property, but having legitimate businesses with proven track records of experience is really, really important for us, regardless of quality. But then on top of that quality means that you're going to stand out from the other legitimate businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important that couples and venues look at not only like the quality of our videos, for example, but also like how do we show up on a wedding day? Are we professional? Are we kind? Are we rude to the venue staff? Are we rude to the planner? Like all that stuff plays into just the whole experience. So vendors, pay attention. That was a really good question.
That's such a great point too, because if you don't treat my client right, I don't care how good you are, I'm not going to recommend you. Or if you're a photographer that shows up in jeans, I don't care how good your photos are. If you're working at the conservatory, you're at a formal event. You probably should at least put a little suit coat on. I love that you say Angelo gets all these compliments whenever he wears a suit coat to an event, because unfortunately it's not as common to find vendors that will align with the dress code of the event. But I think that's so, so important for any vendor to get my recommendation.
And it's such a small thing to do that
it is
makes you stand out in a good way, but also blend in, because if it's a formal event and all the men are wearing suits, and then the photographer, videographer is wearing like short sleeves and like sneakers and shorts, it's like, okay, this does not align at all. But every time Angela wears a suit, I mean, it never fails. At least one person compliments him. So
that's right. It has such a significant impact on the guest and client experience. You're like, oh, my vendors are taking this day seriously. They want to align with my vision for the day. And you're kind of also marketing yourself to their family and their friends that might become potential clients. You want to impress on them that I'm super professional and I know what I'm doing. And look at how easy I'm doing it in a suit coat and heels or, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to make yourself stand out.
Yeah, it is. You're always being watched. If
You
there's
are.
someone at a venue and they're there for their friend's wedding, you know, maybe they might get engaged soon and maybe they might want to hire you. Or maybe they see that you weren't professional, so they don't want to hire you. But you're always being watched, so it's something good to keep in mind. But kind of on a similar note, and you don't have to tell specifics about this, but have you ever had to remove a vendor from your preferred list? And if so, like what kind of behaviors or missteps should vendors in general keep in mind to avoid that? Definitely don't share names or anything.
Because this has never happened, right? Having the opposite of all those qualities that we've already talked about, unprofessionalism is a really quick way to lose a venue's recommendation, to lose my recommendation or approval in any way. And there might be some things vendor to vendor that are specific for that vendor, but I do think that, you know, at our property, not dressing professionally is a really easy way to lose a recommendation. I think damages, unfortunately, they're rare, or they've happened, but they're rare. But if you cause damage or don't treat our property with respect, that's a really easy way to lose, you know, a recommendation. Not working well with other vendor teams is something that is so difficult. There's so many personalities, there's so many people fighting for what they think is best on wedding day, and not being able to collaborate with the other vendors to make the day seamless for the client is unfortunately one of those red flags for the venue. If you end up in a yelling match with another vendor, or, you know, you're just, nobody's getting their way because it has to be my way or the highway, is not really a professional attitude to bring towards the wedding day. So unfortunately, if disagreements between the vendors damper the client experience, that, you know, that's a no for me. But really just the opposite of all the things that we've talked about previously in the green flags for vendors to have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when one or two of the vendors on the full vendor team just don't have that like team player mindset. When they have the mindset of, I'm focusing on my thing's the most
Yeah.
important. It's like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, because I'm like, this is not about me, you, this person, that person. This is about the couple. This is about us working together to best serve the couple, and just us having our own best interest in mind is not the way. And I won't go too far down this rabbit trail, but I mean, we've been yelled at before by another vendor. I will not say the vendor category and I won't say who, but it's like, really? This is not the time or place to be arguing, or like, you know, none of that. So, yeah, very important vendors. If you want to stay on the venue's preferred vendor list, gotta be professional and kind.
Yeah, don't be fighting. Everyone get along, play nice. And that's gonna flow out naturally from the vendors that have that mindset going in. You know, if you come into it wanting your own way, it's gonna be a lot more work to get along with other people. But having vendors that already come in with such a collaborative mindset, especially with us, you know, vendors that are willing to work within our policies, that don't chafe against maybe some restrictions that we have that we feel are maybe best for our staff. If they don't align with yours, we would appreciate some give and some take, or at least open communication about what the problems are. Because if you're just going to stifle this weird tension because you've got an issue with the way that we operate, like, just come to me. I would much rather us hash it out in private and go into the wedding day with clear conscience than to arrive on the day and find out that there was a problem all along. You know, so willing collaboration is so important, and a way to also easily make yourself stand out, you know, among all the other vendors is, wow, they were so easy to work with. They were so nice. They were so flexible. That's what really stands out to me. In really any vendor type.
Yep. So true. And do you feel like you have any hot takes? I know we talked about some spicy things, but do you feel like you have any other hot takes when it comes to like vendor venue collaboration?
I really feel like dress code for me is one of the things. It's not that hard to dress professionally. And that's a hot take. It shouldn't be, but it's a hot take. Yeah.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. I
It shouldn't
have
be.
recommended this to some of um our other vendor industry friends, and some of them, they're just like, I don't really see the big deal. I'm like, I promise you, once you start dressing like very professionally, you will see the difference. It will be like night and day. People compliment you. It's just, if you are a vendor and you don't dress that professionally, just take the leap of faith, do it
There you
at
go.
your next wedding and see the difference, and
Yeah.
it'll
There's
be a big
something to be
difference.
said for comfort, especially if the weather's less than ideal. Like, do I wish I could live my life in athleisure? Yes, I 100% do. And I wish that were acceptable in the professional realm, but it totally is not. But not only does it help like put you in that mindset of I am going to work, I am going to a formal event, and it kind of influences your behavior. I think just the psychology of being in professional dress or being in formal wear will make you, I think, exude that attitude, but also it reflects really well to other people that you're taking your job seriously. But you still need to dress for comfort. Like, I understand if you want to wear a suit with tennis shoes or a suit with like a more comfortable shoe because you're on your feet all day. I'm not saying you should give yourself blisters every wedding that you work. Whenever I had to do like 12, 15-hour wedding days, I would bring 3 pairs of shoes. One for morning setup, one for ceremony cocktail hour, and then one for like post reception. So that way my feet are getting a break, but I'm not wearing tennis shoes all day long. So do whatever makes sense for you. And if you're a bartender, I'm not going to have the same expectation for you as I would the DJ as the host of the event. So each vendor category has its own nuance in how you should dress and what might be more appropriate. But if you're guest facing, dress professionally, point blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's easier these days because, like, there are, for example, there are stretchy suits that if you're a
Yeah.
photographer, videographer, you need to be able to move around. You can get a stretchy suit. Angela has these really nice dress shoes, but they're literally like tennis shoes, but they are dress shoes. So it's like, I feel like nowadays it's easier to look
That's
really
true.
good, but also be really comfortable because both are pretty important, but, there's a little give and take sometimes. Okay, well, I knew we could talk for a long time about this. There's plenty more questions I could ask, but I'd love to sort of wrap things up. So, if you could give couples just like one last piece of advice about working with their venue, what would that be?
If I could only give one piece of advice,
One or two.
one or two, um, it all just comes down to communicate with us. We want to be an active part of the process. You should never hesitate to reach out to the venue. Caveat, we're not your planner. There's that age-old question, is the venue staff the planning staff? Not at our property and not at every venue. But so we're not there to plan the wedding for you and answer all of your questions when really the planner should be answering the logistics and the design questions. We are happy to be a resource. Please use us as a resource. I've seen a lot of weddings, at our property now, and so maybe what I've learned can benefit you. Don't be scared to come and ask us questions. And in fact, there might be some questions that we're better suited to answer than your planner or your photographer or another vendor type. So don't hesitate to use your venue staff as a resource, because we would much rather educate and guide and help the planning process than just be super standoffish, hope you figure it out, because that doesn't benefit anybody. So please use us as a resource. Please ask questions. Please do a tour. Please read the FAQs, read your contract, and hopefully the planning process can be a lot more simple. Ask me my vendor recommendations so I can point you in the direction of some amazing vendors that are going to treat you right, that are going to be professional, that are going to make the planning seamless for you and, allow us to be part of the celebration.
I love that. And kind of on a similar note, if you could give vendors one or two last pieces of advice for collaborating with venues, what would that advice be?
Yeah, use this as a resource. No, but really, ask if there is an opportunity. We might not always have an opportunity for collaboration or even for recommendation or approval or whatever that looks like. But introduce yourself. I can't know that you're open to collaboration or that you might have a service that's exactly what a client is looking for if I've never heard of your company. So it doesn't hurt to put yourself out there and make the introduction, whether we have an opportunity or not. But I'd love to keep you in mind for when we might have that opportunity later on down the road. Or if you have really niche services or culturally specific services or regionally specific services, introduce yourself. Come out and do a tour, schedule a call with us, show us that you're open to collaboration, let us learn more about you. So that way it's only going to be easier for us to pair clients with a vendor that's going to be a great fit for them. And if you have the same priorities as us, luxury and excellence and a seamless client experience, we want to get to know you.
Yeah, this is so good. I think a lot of vendors probably are a little nervous sometimes when interacting with venues that they really would love to work at. But I think this is very encouraging for vendors just to know that, you're not untouchable. You can be reached. You guys are personable and friendly, and you want to collaborate just like all of us other vendors want to collaborate. So
yeah, and we've been blown away by the support and really the excitement that a lot of vendors have shared about working at our property. We only have so many weddings and so many clients, so I know that means some photographers can never shoot at the conservatory. But if you're interested, reach out. And we're happy to know that you're out there and that you're interested, and we'd love to schedule a tour with you sometime.
Yeah, awesome. And if listeners would like to find you and learn more about Blackberry Ridge, where can they find you on social media and then website?
Yeah, go check out our website at blackberryridgega.com and follow our 2 Instagram accounts at Blackberry Ridge GA and at the Conservatory Blackberry Ridge.
Awesome. And we will absolutely link all of that in the show notes as well. Well, awesome. Erika, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun. I loved learning just all about all your tips and your insights, and I know that our listeners will as well. And yeah, just thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for being a gracious host.
I will talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wedding Pro podcast. If you found this episode helpful, we would love it for you to share with a fellow vendor or someone who's getting married soon. Your support means the world to us and helps us reach more people in this amazing industry. We'll see you next time.